I'm Travis Bader, and this is the Silvercore podcast. Silvercore has been providing its members with the skills and knowledge necessary to be confident and proficient in the outdoors for over 20 years, and we make it easier for people to deepen their connection to the natural world. If you enjoy the positive and educational content we provide, please let others know by sharing, commenting, and following so that you can join in on everything that Silvercore stands for. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a member of the Silvercore Club and community, visit our website at silvercore.ca. An expert in the field of artificial intelligence, today's guest helped architect such things as infinite scrolling, like functionality, ad optimization, and other attention-diverting AI features. Feeling something was deeply missing from his life, this city dweller uprooted his life to live in the mountains, to learn to hunt and trap, and has written the book, Turning Feral, which documents his journey. Broadcasting remotely from the base of the Sawtooth Mountains in the small town of Atlanta, Idaho, population 35, welcome to the Silvercore podcast, Zach Hanson.
Wow. Thank you, Travis. That was quite the introduction, but hearing you read off those things that I've been a part of, I can't help but feel a little guilty as I think about people scrolling through their phones and stuck in social media loopholes.
You know, I remember reading a book a long time ago. I think it was called Addictive Habits. I think that's what the book was called, or Programming Addiction, something along those lines, but addictive traits. Anyways, the psychology of building like infinite scrolling and like functionality, there's a lot that goes into keeping people hooked on their electronic devices and out basically indoors and numb, looking for that next dopamine hit.
Yep, that's exactly it. It's one of those weird things where that psychology and technology merge in a non-positive way, as we found out over the years. But it's interesting for me because I'm a new father. I have two young kids. One's 2, the other's 4 months old. And, just seeing how easily my 2-year-old daughter can interact with an iPhone or an iPad is mind-blowing to me. And it's scary at the same time and makes me feel tinted of regret.
Well, you're an expert in the field of artificial intelligence. And I think about how, like you say, how easy it is for a youngster to be able to handle an iPhone or an iPad. Really, like if you look at us as humans, and let's say we had a bunch of dogs that we had to take care of, we could pretty easily whip them into shape, have them trained up, and doing what we want to do because we're smarter than dogs. Artificial intelligence, that's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm looking at OpenAI, ChatGPT, all of this stuff, and I'm thinking of the mass amount of information that's out there and the idea that people think they have unique thought, but really how much of what we do is unique, how much of it is just us running on autopilot based on things that we've kind of learned. I gotta wonder, as cool as this whole artificial intelligence thing is that we're on the sort of the cusp of, it's also pretty scary in some ways too. I don't know. What's your take on this whole AI thing from a person with a background?
There's a reason I live at the end of an 80-mile dirt road in a town of 35 people. In reality, right? It's not from a fear-mongering standpoint, like, the robots are going to take over the world, but, it's so easy to be manipulated by technology and, being so entrenched in it myself, I wanted to personally get away and, introduce as much non-technical aspects into my everyday life as I possibly could, because there's no way you get away from it. Right? I mean, you and I are able to have this conversation because of really cool technology. Elon Musk has some low orbit satellites that are beaming signals up and down so that you and I can talk right now. Sure. And that's pretty freaking cool, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But, when you get through the social aspects, that's where like I wanted buffers and I chose to live where we're living now. So, when I am done with work, when my laptop is off, when my cell phone's not in my hand, or I go 2 feet out of my driveway, I'm disconnected. Right. And, I loved your metaphor at the beginning though, as far as the dog training. The only thing that I would disagree with you there, Travis, is as you read my book, I don't know if that's a great reference because there are so many canines, at least wild ones, that are way smarter than me. So,
Yeah, that was a recurring theme as I read through the book. I love the humility. I love the honesty in your book. Um, yeah, I was going to say monkeys. I don't know, dogs. Essentially, just a mass aggregate of information out there that when you just uh, when you take all of that, it's pretty easy to spot patterns, particularly if we're programmed to do it. Like I was
yep,
using the artificial intelligence, I'd upload whole books and I'd say, explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. And then for fun, I'll make it into a poem, turn it into a haiku, and it would
yep,
do it. The amount that you can upload now, I think as of a week or two ago, has been limited, but I'm sure they'll charge for that feature.
yeah,
But another one, like I wrote a article before and I thought, just for fun, I'll give it a one sentence parameter on this. It was about 5 or 6 pages typed article that I put together. Write an article on, and I put it out there. And if it didn't come pretty close to what I spent a few days writing within a couple of seconds, I mean, it's amazing what it can do. And I thought I had all this unique thought in there.
yeah. I mean, I think that's what's interesting is where AI, especially when you're talking about Chat GPT and
Mm,
other things that are trained on large corpuses of data,
mm,
data that is an aggregate of many people who are not as unique as we think we are. We all think we're super unique, individuals,
sure.
but when you look at it in an aggregate, we're not really. So when you look at the ingestion of articles, the ingestion of books, and you do that across a wide array of individuals, when you put a prompt in, you're going to get something back that's pretty close to you. But, to put a little feather of optimism here, like the amount of data it would take to have 1000% uniqueness in writing and art would be nearly impossible. There's always going to be this percentage and ability for humans to not necessarily outperform because that's defined by the metrics you're measuring it. But from a
Mm,
uniqueness perspective, there's optimism there. I mean, you're going to get really close and it's going to be fuzzy lines where you're like, was that like a machine that, wrote that or painted that? But, humans are humans and we do some pretty unique shit. So I think we're
yeah,
always going
yeah.
to have the edge there slightly.
Yeah, I guess the only scary thing about that whole AI is what you mentioned earlier, and that's the ability to manipulate. And we've seen manipulation at large scale, particularly over the last few years, whether for good or for bad or best intentions or whatever it might be. But you take the job of manipulation and you look at that mass aggregate and you take a look at what would be the most effective way to do so. It, it'll spit back solutions in seconds, what would usually take experts a fair bit of time to come up with a plan. So that's the scary thing.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you get big mass groups of people, with proctored information, good or bad, you're going to have
Mm.
fallout. And again, that's maybe why I live in a town at the end of a road that happened to be in the 60s, a really popular place for nuclear bug out individuals because of the way the trade winds blow. So, we've got some caves,
Mm.
we've got all sorts of stuff, natural water, hot springs. So, come out to the Atlanta, Idaho when the AI robots take over and we can all hide out and fight back.
Well, you're doing something that a lot of people fantasize about, a lot of people dream about, but not many people have the courage to actually actuate. And, particularly since COVID hit, the idea of being more self sufficient, self reliant, where does my food come from? How can I survive if things go sideways? Um, you started that prior to COVID when the world really started becoming awake to that. Can you tell me a little bit about what life was like prior to wanting to hunt and trap and move out in the bush, and kind of what drove you to this?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors, right? First and foremost, the life that I was living with my ex-wife at the time was very nice. It was very cush,
Mm.
right? I was working in artificial intelligence. My ex-wife was an FBI special agent, so we were, living in Louisiana, which is, not my favorite state in the world, but It was good. We had a nice big
Okay.
house, we had the cars, we had dogs, we went on vacations every year. We were really doing, and I mentioned in the book, keeping up with the Joneses, right? It's like, you know,
Mm,
what was the American dream for us? White picket fence, big house, all of that. Um, and I felt hollow, just to be frank. Like, I didn't know what the feeling was. It's not like I woke up in a depression, but I just constantly felt like there was something missing. And, my
mm,
ex-wife was an athlete. I was an athlete. We both did, really high level jujitsu. She was a jujitsu world champion. And so we were traveling for competition, and I did some ultra running, but I was always focused on fitness. And part of fitness
mm.
is nutrition. I'd been a wrestler all through high school, college, the whole lot. So it was something that was just a big part of our lives, especially since we didn't have kids. It was, wake up,
Mm,
train, work, repeat. And, that brought some joy, brought community and camaraderie and, our gym. But as we
sure.
kind of got down that path more and more of like, okay, what can we optimize? What can we optimize? You start looking at the food you eat. We were counting our macros, doing all the stuff that makes you miserable, in my opinion, hindsight being what it is. Um, you
Yeah.
know, And the meats we were consuming were okay, but to get, like, decent quality, we were having to go to real high-end grass-fed beef, grass-fed bison,
Mm,
and that led us down the path of, like, okay, well, what about wild game? And this was also the same time that I think, you know and my wife, as I mentioned in the book, was very much into social media. Even I was to a degree with Instagram. So, you followed the Joe Rogans, the Cam Hanes, and they're like, "Yeah, I eat elk meat." And I'm like, "Well, what is that?"
mhm.
And that really started I guess the snowball for me. It was just a curiosity, and I happened to have, in-laws. My wife's family were hunters. They were from Middle Tennessee, and
Right.
we started talking about it at family get-togethers, and we were talking about like we should really get and we were using all the really you know cringy language, like we should harvest our own meat and all this really dumb shit. And my father-in-law, this good old boy, looks at me. He's like, I've got a freezer full of deer from like the past 6 years that I go get every year, and you're not harvesting
Yeah.
shit, shooting it, and it's right there." So immediately brought down a peg, but it's like, oh, so he gave us some ground venison, and we tried it.
Yeah.
We were eating it, delicious food. You know, did we see like a performance gain from switching from, grass-fed beef to, you know, wild game? I don't know. Probably not, but it was good. It was a
Sure.
mental thing. And that prompted me to buy a bow. I don't know why. I had no interest in rifle hunting at the time, so got a hand-me-down bow and just kind of started the journey.
Yeah, you started hard. I mean, you're gonna start with the bow and say, "Oh, I wanna be a hunter. Okay, let's get a bow." I've seen people on social media do this. I've seen others. Looks easy enough, but,
Yeah.
I mean, from reading your book, the, maybe not as easy as the social media influencers might make it sound. So, tell me about
Yeah.
that journey. You got your bow, you got a buddy he said, "Let's go practice with this and let's be hunters." What
Yeah.
were people laughing at you?
My ex-wife included. Yeah, it was one of those things because I grew up in South Carolina, a rural area, but I was surrounded by people who would hunt, but I never went hunting. So I at this
Mhm.
time I think I was like 28, 29 years old. So, getting up close to my 30s and I never hunted. All of a sudden I'm like, I want to hunt and I want to hunt with a bow and I'm going to get a hand-me-down bow from a buddy who's a little shorter than me and I'm just going to make it work. So in the book, I chronicle like some of the setting up a range and hucking arrows into my neighbors' roofs, things like that. All the stuff you don't want
Yeah,
to be honest about, but happened. Couldn't even pull
yeah.
my bow back, dry fired it, the whole lot, and you know, learned the hard way. But for all the bad that comes out of social media, like seeing those influencers was to be cheesy, an influence on me. It gave me some confidence,
Yeah.
like, hey, like, this person can do it. I can figure it out. I'm hard headed enough to, and there's a plenty of YouTube videos. And going back to technology, the one of the amazing things is just the readily available amount of information, whether that's YouTube, whether that's a social media platform. Like if you do want to learn, there's available resources that are easy to consume because when I grew up, my granddad always pushed me. He's like, you want to learn something, read a book. And that's what I was raised on. So I
Hmm.
love it. And that's one of the reasons I
Hmm.
like to write books. But, now you don't have to even do that. You can go and watch a 2-minute video on how to pull a bow back and then just hope that you, figure it out. And that's what I did.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the mass amount of information that's out there, free.
Yep.
YouTube's obviously a big one. And I think that's the whole reason why we have an air brackets for those who aren't watching and they're listening, influencers. And some people hate the name, some people love the name, but essentially there's so much information out there that these people become information concierges. And you say, well, I like that person or I like what they're doing. Maybe that'll shortcut me from having to sift through everything that's out there. And I'll just follow their steps, ABC. And that's why I think that the whole influencer trend kind of came about. And you're right. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. Depends on what you're looking at and depends on how you want to use it. But clearly, it turned out for the best for you if it got you outside and it got you hunting.
Yep.
Yeah. So when you first started out, I know you write in the book, you figured, okay, I learned how to do this. I'm going to be out and I'll get myself a deer. I just got to sit up in a tree stand. A deer will walk by and I'll take this thing. Maybe I got to wait a little bit, but it's going to happen. That wasn't quite
Yep.
the story, was it?
Nope. It went probably, and one of the things that I hope, and I've gotten feedback on the book is, people who've even hunted their whole lives kind of appreciate, these overlooked aspects. Like I mentioned, as I thought about pig hunting and deer hunting for the first time, I had every scenario painted in my head. By this time, I'd shot thousands of arrows. I could do it with confidence. Never shot at an animal.
Mm.
We got our ex-wives, FBI agents to heckle us while we shot to kind of, we knew we were going to get buck fever, so we wanted to do that. And to
Yeah.
this day, I've never had buck fever. I think thanks to that section or session. So that was a you know good investment on our part. But you know, I had every potential outcome mapped out in my head, except for the one that was most likely to happen, which was nothing. And that's what I talk about in the book. So I
Mm.
would sit for like 2 days in this tree where a deer, I was told, would walk by. I'd be able to put my pin on his vitals, and that's it. That's the story. But all I saw were squirrels. So
Right.
you're never prepared fully for what the experience is going to be like. And honestly, like a lot of hunting is really boring. It's a lot of time for
Mm.
self-reflection and, battling with your own ego and realizing that you're not really hot shit. And, nature really owns you at all times of the day. So,
Can you talk about battling with your ego when you're out there? Because I know when I'm out hunting or I'm in the mountains or I'm hiking and I'm out in the water surfing, whatever it is, I'm isolated, I'm out there, inevitably
yep.
the brain starts going and things start coming up. You're having fights are reoccurring for me anyways. And it takes a few days for the brain to kind of shut off and to kind of move to a more positive area. What's it like for you? And when you say battling the ego, what do you mean?
Well, I've been very fortunate, Travis, in that I grew up in combat sports where your ego gets decimated constantly. And I'll give a poignant example, and this might make a few people laugh. So, my first year of high school, I was on the wrestling team. Um, Never wrestled before, just got a whim. I wanted to wrestle and started doing it. Was not terrible, but I was on like the junior team, right? So not the varsity team.
Mm.
We go to our first match against our rival school, who was like, state champions, blah, blah, blah. Well, the 135-pound wrestler on the varsity team got sick that day. So this
Okay.
is the first time that both of my parents, my sister, girlfriend are coming to watch me do JV. But I get bumped up to varsity because this guy is sick. The opponent I'm going against is a 2-time state champion. So my first real wrestling experience, I go out and I go to the little board to sign in. My parents, everybody's there watching. They're like, oh, it's Zach. I have this ridiculous headgear because I wasn't cool yet. I didn't know all the cool gear, so I looked like a dork. I sign in at the table, Travis. I turn around to go into the mat to go actually wrestle this guy who's inevitably going to beat my ass, trip over the mat, land on my face, bust my nose. I get blood time before the match starts. I get a tampon
Oh,
shoved up my nose, and then in a singlet in a cold gym, I get like mercy killed by this guy in like 20 seconds. So,
oh man. With all your family and
this
friends watching.
exactly. So that was like my first experience with like really just crushing your ego and realizing it doesn't exist. But what I meant with the conversation about battling your ego, for me, I've always had comparison issues. I think a lot of people do, and
Okay.
influencers and social media propagated that at the beginning of my hunting journey. So like seeing
Mm.
the Cam Hanes, seeing the Joe Rogan, seeing the, John Dudleys of the world out there just killing it, every, you know, post is about this great kill. I had built up in myself, like I should be able to do that. Like that is the experience I'm going to have. That is what hunting is like. And so when I was
Hmm.
out there and I wasn't experiencing those things, I wasn't having those successes, I was running into things that maybe they didn't talk about, or, not by them intentionally leaving it out, but they've been doing it for so long, you kind of forget the steps along the way. And
Hmm.
that was causing me to have these battles with my ego. Like, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I not being able to have these experiences like these guys are? And that's the ego battle I'd have, like sitting in a tree stand. Like, what am I doing wrong? Like, you know, I should be able to have the same thing they are. And the answer is
Hmm.
no. I would put my ego aside. You know, I'm new. I don't know what I'm doing. I am on my own journey and running my own race, but I let some of those things sneak in, and that's what that's my ego trap personally, and I get caught in that sometimes,
Mm.
and I have to check myself on it.
Well, I guess the algorithm doesn't really support people sitting in a tree stand, freezing cold, and going home and
Yeah,
posting that over and over again. I mean, so it can build an unreal expectation for new hunters out there based on what people are posting. You know, oftentimes I've seen with some of these influencers, um, it's not always their animal that they're standing beside. And they might not say it's their animal, but
yeah,
they're standing beside an animal, and people will look at this and be like, how is this person always going out and always successful? And
yeah,
maybe they're not taking into account the fact that they'll hunt in groups and one person in a group of however many was successful and everyone had their picture taken there. So it's, how would you describe hunting with your experience now to somebody who's looking to get into it?
yeah. And I think that's kind of part of was my mission with this book, because as I talk to people, just like anybody else, like I feel like you know you start CrossFit or you meet somebody who just started CrossFit, they're never going to shut the fuck up. It's CrossFit this,
Right.
CrossFit that,
Right.
and same with like jujitsu, same with hunting. And I'm not opposed to that. So when I first started hunting and I took my first animal, everybody within a 300-foot radius of me at any time of the day was hearing about hunting and the benefits and how you're going to be healthier and connect with
Yeah.
nature and all this shit. But to answer that question about like what I would say to people is, I have been getting a lot of feedback that there are people out there like me who are adult onset hunters or
Hmm.
adult people who are curious about learning to hunt as an adult. But the
Hmm.
barriers of entry, including like influencers who are posting these, trophy shots. Again, I'm not opposed to that, but these kind of
Sure.
success measures, I think there's a little bit of an intimidation factor. And what I
Mm.
wanted to do was like, it's right to be intimidated because it is an
Sure.
intimidating thing. But to let people know that unless you're going out with tons of guides and paying top dollar, which is also okay, and I did some of that too to beat down the learning curve, you're gonna
Mm.
fail. You're gonna be met with morally compromising decisions to make that you might not have expected getting into hunting. You're gonna
Mhm.
have to get legitimately elbow deep in an animal at some point or another and learn as you go and maybe waste meat, even though, most people getting in are like the, wanton waste, like I want to harvest everything of the animal, which is great. And I do that too. But along the way,
Sure.
you're going to mess up and you're going to, you know, disrespect an animal in your own eyes if that's the mentality you have. And I want people to know that you have to go through that. It's
Mm.
part of the journey is that you're going to have to learn and push your boundaries, morally, physically in a lot of instances, and not to be afraid of that. and recognize that it's
Mm.
not going to necessarily match probably what got you interested, which are the influencers or the people who are, celebrity hunters and things of that nature.
Well, when I'm looking at some of the pictures that you have in the book there, I see Vortex Optics bino pouch,
Mhm.
Benchmade knife, and I'm seeing a little bit of a trend. I think I saw some First Light gear in there, and it looks like some of your purchasing decisions may have been influenced by a very popular Netflix show, Meat Eater. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, it's part and parcel, and I'm sure like they have doubled down and they're making a great killing on people who are getting curious about it. But yeah, I mean that is
Hmm.
purchasing power. So one of the things I do in my role now is ad monetization algorithms, right? So
Okay.
of course, you're paying for ad space, you're paying for eyeballs of people who have similar interests as you. And of course, I was fed from the beginning of my journey, Steve Ranella, uh, Vortex stuff. I mean, I've got a Vortex optic up there. I've
Yeah.
got freaking knock on releases, the whole lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it goes with the territory, and I'm not ashamed of that. And you
No.
get dogs for it too. Like I wear Sitka, right? I started
Sure.
hunting at
Yeah.
a time where I was able to afford, nice camo.
Yeah.
And all the people that I followed wore Sitka. So I was like, well, monkey see, monkey do. I'm gonna buy this. So of course you get ragged by
Yeah.
people along the way, but it's I'm not
It's all
ashamed.
part and parcel.
It's
Yeah.
true.
You know, uh, talking about guides. Now, I've never hunted with a guide. I'm fortunate enough to have a Ballard, a good friend of mine who's quite accomplished in hunting that I can typically lean on for advice and assistance. But going the guide route is, I think, a fantastic way to shortcut the learning experience. And when you look at, like, for example, on Sitka's advertising, there's quite often acknowledgments to the guides who have taken their pro hunters out hunting. So even the pros are out there doing that if they want to be getting that trophy animal or have a success rate that's going to be something they can blog about or Instagram about. But you went out with in your book with some guides, and I had a very couple of humbling experiences. And if you're willing to talk about that outside of the book here, I'd love to chat about that.
Yeah. So guides are not something that I had on my agenda, right? Like for me, when I started, like it was my in-laws who quote guided me out of the gate, right? So these are the
Hmm.
guys in touching back on the Sitka and the stuff I had, like when I started hunting and the first time I went deer hunting on my in-laws hunting lease, you know, it got muted chuckles because my buddy and I showed up in brand new Sitka camo. Meanwhile, we've never killed an animal. And my father-in-law, who's probably killed more deer than I ever will in my life, sitting there in Walmart camo, like, okay, Walmart camo and
Yeah.
jeans. He's like, I don't get it, but you guys do you. Spend the money on what you want to spend your money on. But he was
Yeah.
in, for all intents and purposes, my first guide. So I can't say that I never did guided hunting. I feel like most people do, unless you go the full DIY solo route, and good
Mm.
on you. But when I
Hmm.
moved out to Idaho, and little foreshadowing for people, I've talked about my ex-wife. Um, a little bit after my journey, we ended up getting a divorce, pretty amicable, but I was left at this crossroads where I was like, what do I want to do? Where can I go? I had no children. The opportunities were endless, and I had visited Idaho, and I knew I wanted to hunt elk. I wanted to hunt antelope. I wanted to learn to trap. So I was like, well, you know, this unexpected event happened in my life. So I'm just going to pack up my car and drive to Idaho, which is exactly what I did. Um,
Hmm.
got out there, found a place in the mountains way, way back. Our place opens up to 3,000 acres of national forest land. And I was like, how am I going to learn to hunt elk? Like I've only sat in a tree stand for some pigs and deer. I can't bugle. I can now. Pretty good too, if I might
Yeah.
add. But I couldn't
Nice.
bugle. I didn't know how to do anything outside of hiking. And that I sucked at that pretty good when I got up to elevation, it turns out. Um, and, you know, I decided, I had the means that I wanted to go with a guide to take me on my first archery elk hunt. So yeah,
Mm.
So also another foreshadowing that I have a new company that is launching at the Western Hunt Expo called the Outfitter.guide. But it's kind
Right.
of based on my own personal experience, which was I went to Google, I got dumped in the lap of a bunch of, top of the funnel companies like bookyourhunt.com, all of which do a great job where you can pick like an animal, a
Sure.
species, state, whatever, and they'll give you a list of guides. But that's where they
Yeah.
cut off. And with that, I found a guide in Stanley, Idaho. He's like, "Yep, I've got a one-on-one archery opening in, 8 months for September. You know, send me half of the deposit or send me half of the whole price of the hunt, which was expensive. It's close to 6 grand for a seven
Yeah.
day, horseback in wall tent hunt to my
Hmm.
PO box in a state, 3 states away in Arizona, and I'll see you in 8 months." So,
Right.
I thought I was getting
Yep.
scammed. I'm like, "Well, fuck it. Like, let's do this." So I sent the check,
Yeah.
it cleared. And for those 8 months, I was just kinda left scratching my head. Like, I'd email occasionally and he'd be like, "I'm sorry, I'm on my combine, fuck off. I wanna be doing these other things
Typical.
important." Yeah, typical guide,
Hmm.
right? They wanna be doing other
Yeah.
stuff, not customer management.
Right.
Meanwhile, I was talking to my now wife and I'm like, "Man, I don't even know if I'm gonna get fed." And so when the time of the hunt came around 8 months later, I was praying that the 10 Cliff Bars she packed me, would last me the 7 days if I didn't get food. But, you know, I ended up going out there, my ass is sore from riding a horse for the first time in 10 years into the backcountry. And that experience with a guide just beat down that learning curve. Like I was like that annoying kid. I'm sure they hated me. I was like, why did we do this? Why did we stop here? What does that help? All of that stuff. And ultimately didn't
Yeah.
harvest an animal the first year. I missed twice. So go figure. And it is what it is, and you're devastated and you go through those normal emotions, but it helped. So,
Mm.
that experience with guiding beat down that learning curve so sharply. And I did it again the next year with the same guide, went to a slightly different area, but same story, didn't end up harvesting an animal, weather and everything else. And then this past year, I went and did my own DIY up in West Yellowstone, was calling elk in myself, doing the whole lot. So, it was, from start to finish on my elk hunting journey with archery, 2 years with a guide to now doing 2 years DIY with some success. It was
Mm.
worth it.
Right. Yeah. The range of emotions that go through on a miss. I mean, at least it was a clean miss, right?
Yeah.
But those range of emotions that go through are something to behold, and there's a mental management process that a person has to work through in order to get themselves up. And there's a feeling of possible humiliation, or what are other people going to think of me? And man, I spent all of this money, and the pressure is on, and I totally jammed, and all of these other feelings. I'm sure that you must
Yeah.
have been going through your head. How did you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. Like, I didn't have an Instagram, I wasn't like active on social media. So I didn't have that added pressure to be like, hey guys, I'm going on this guided hunt, look at me do this. Oh, I missed.
Yeah.
So I feel for people who are very active there or like put it out
Mm.
to the universe, like they're going to do this thing. But, even in my close bubble, that I did put it out there. So my family's like, what, you're spending what to go where to do what? And then
Mm.
I come back, people who don't hunt, you know, a lot of times have this mentality like, oh, you just go out and you shoot an animal. That it's not this big involved thing that takes patience, skill, and name all the other adjectives you want to.
Mhm.
And that the likelihood of you know missing an animal is way higher than success. Like I think the area we were
Mhm.
in for archery had like a 13% success rate. So
Mm.
you're paying money to learn more than you're paying money to successfully harvest an animal. That was my viewpoint, but other people didn't see
Mhm.
that way. So I did have those emotions after missing that elk of embarrassment, right? Yeah,
Sure.
I dreaded going home to my now wife to be like, oh hey honey, all that money we spent, and I promised you I was going to make you this beautiful elk steak dinner. Yeah, that's not going to happen. My family, the ones who were already thinking I was loony for spending that amount of money, they're like, well, you're still loony. You still have some screws loose. That's confirmed. And of course, if you have a good friend group, which I do have a very close, tight knit group of friends, some who hunt, some who don't, I'm still getting ribbed to this day. So, it is
Well,
you know,
that's what friends do,
constant
right?
brain. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm in a group chat with some buddies who don't necessarily hunt, but it goes without fail, like once a week. It's like, oh, Zach, are you out observing elk again? Or, something to that effect. So lives to this day, but it helps like that kind of humor, that, self-depreciation. And for me, it was coming to terms with, it is a lifelong pursuit. And yes, I'm making up for lost time because I didn't start as a young kid, but it's a journey, and it's not one after you have a few experiences that you can expect to just master. Like, it is time out in the woods. It's, those missed shots, that morality bending I talked about, like when I got into trapping, like when you get into situations where you have to make tough decisions, those don't come
Mm,
from a book or YouTube. It comes from time in the field. And yes, there are shortcuts, guides, mentors, things like that. But ultimately, it's being out there. And that's what I had to come to terms with and coach myself up on to get over those,
mm.
really emotional misses and, failures and disappointments.
I guess, and you call it a failure. Well, a few things you brought up. When you talk with the social media people and the pressure that they must feel advertising to go on a hunt, I think a lot of them just advertise afterwards if they're successful, and they'll just post a little bit after, hey, going on this hunt, and here's this, and hey,
Yeah.
great success. And but then, people say, oh, my hunt was a failure. Well, how come? Well, I didn't get an animal. Well, maybe from somebody starting out into hunting and that's looked at the ultimate result there, I wouldn't say that that's a failure personally. How would you define success for yourself on a hunt?
Yeah. I mean, you're 100% right. And, you know, all of those hunts, let me put it this way. Every hunt I've been on, which a lot of them have been failures in the sense of not harvesting an animal. Um,
Sure.
but every single one of them, I have learned an absurd amount, either about myself, about the animal, or about
Mm.
what not to do, which then I can apply for
Yeah.
the next hunt on, what to try not to replicate. Um,
Mm.
so, failure, failure might not be the right word because I did learn.
Mm.
I just failed in harvesting an animal,
Right.
which, is ultimately the goal. But I don't sit and beat myself up saying, "Hey, Zach, you failed, you suck, blah blah blah." But I did fail at
Mm.
harvesting an animal, and I'm pretty damn good at that. So I'm just trying to get used to saying those words.
Well, one piece that I'm really curious about, and I think a lot of other people would be, is that little bit of a piece in between city life and living out in the woods. And you've discussed there's a little, perhaps some of the impetus was the life-changing event of the separation from your ex-wife, but it seems like, to me anyways, when I read through the book, that wasn't the piece that pushed you to want to go out and write a book and live in the bush. It seems like there's something that was always kind of sitting in the back of your head, maybe dormant for a while, and something happened in you that made you decide to jump in head first. And I think a lot of people are fearful of doing what you've successfully done. So I'm curious about that little piece there.
Yeah, it's funny. So when I wrote this book, I worked with a company called Scribe Media down in Austin. It was co-founded by Tucker Max. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He wrote the books, I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, kind of like the misogynistic
Yeah,
stories
okay.
of his time in law school. He's changed a lot, but he's very much on the sustainability track now. He has a farm, kids, harvesting his own bison and, like raising bees, all sorts of stuff. But he's an amazing writer. So
Mm,
when I went down and was working with them kind of on the synopsis of the book, talking about the intros, you know, part of the exercise, like, who are you writing this for? What is the
mm,
persona of the person that you're writing it for? And when it gets down to it, I wrote out this persona, and I realized that when I wrote it, that it was me, which makes total sense, right? It was me,
yeah.
5, 6 years ago, but it was like for that middle management man or woman, right, who is working a corporate job, droning away, and they start to daydream occasionally, and obviously bolster through the pandemic about, okay, let's just hypothetically say everything breaks down. Or, I can't
Mm.
go buy toilet paper. There's no meat on the shelves. What would happen? And, it's one of those things where in the persona I talked about it, and this was me, I always came up with excuses like, oh, I'd figure it out. Oh, I'd do this. But the reality is, if you take away that ego, these are the readers who would sit there and be like, oh shit, my kids would die. Yeah,
Mm.
I literally don't know how to process an animal. Like, even if I hit a deer with my car, I'd be throwing it whole on a fire and hoping there'd be something to salvage, to nibble on.
Right.
And that's the reality, and that's the reality I was living in between those stages. Like, I had this dormant ember, right? That I always loved mountain man stories as a kid. I always thought about living out in the woods. I talk about in the book, like before the divorce happened, my wife and I happened to take a chance trip to Idaho,
Mm.
on one of our vacations, and it hooked me. I saw all these animals, and I was looking at her. This was pre-hunting, and I was like, "We're moving here one day." And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe 20 years when we retire, we'll buy a cabin or whatever." And I was like, "No, you don't understand. Like, I feel physically called here, um, because
Hmm.
I saw the opportunity to learn." And that experience, coupled with the true feelings I had underlying, knowing that if something broke, and I didn't have kids at the time, and that's more personal to me now with 2 kids, but
Right.
I I wouldn't have been able to support my wife. I wouldn't have been able to support kids had I had them. Like, we literally would have starved to death eventually, or had to join some Walking Dead type commune and hope for the best, and hope that people who were a little bit more in tune with Earth would be able to help provide us food or teach us. But that time, the time to learn is not when shit hits the fan. It's to take that
Right.
proactive step. That's what pushed me over the edge to start before the divorce. And then, like you said, that catalytic event in my life just happened to be the point where I just went all in.
Were you nervous about that? Like, what if I go out there and I'm making a terrible decision? Like, I'm escaping away. Like, did you have a large friend group in Louisiana, where you're from? A bunch of people that you would interact on a daily basis, and were concerned about a population of 35 and in Atlanta, Idaho. There were
Yeah,
these things kind of in your head?
a little bit. We had a really tight group with our jujitsu gym. All right. I mean, those were the
Mm.
people we did everything with. We were traveling all the time. So, yeah, there was concern there, and I was definitely going to miss those folks. But there was also a little bit of, if anyone's been through a divorce, you'll know this feeling. Like, I did just want to get away. I didn't want people to be
Mm.
giving me advice like, "Oh, Zach, it's okay. You did." I just wanted to tell people to F off. Like, I just wanted to go,
Right.
people always say, like, "I just want to go hide in the woods." So I did.
Mhm.
So yeah, I didn't have
Right.
that fear at the outset. But when I got out there and I realized I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and I talk about it in the book, like, I didn't know how
Mhm.
to start a fire in my wood burning stove. And it gets
I
down to
saw
like
that.
yeah. We'll get down to like -18 sometimes.
Mm.
So, I'm sitting there jackhammering, freezing in my room, wondering why my fire's not working. I just don't have the flue open. Right.
Yeah.
So it was when I got there that I was learning all those hard lessons. Like, did I get in over my head? Like, did I make this impulse decision to just change everything in my life? And, thankfully I had to stick with it for a
Mhm.
lot of different reasons. And, obviously came out on the other end learning a lot and still learning a lot. But
No, no kidding. Well, Idaho sounds like a great place. Good friend of mine, Carl Fox. He's from Idaho, lives up here in Canada, and he's always going on about it. And I think maybe in the next month or so, I'm probably going to head down there and just check it out, just so I get a better idea of what this is all about. Brad
we're
Brooks,
we're,
he owns
we're
our galley. What's
yeah,
that?
whereabouts in Idaho.
Boise. So probably very
Okay.
different from where you're at.
Well, no, so it's funny. We actually have a place in Boise now. So it's funny
Okay.
about um, we live full time up in Atlanta, Idaho, which is a town of 35 people. But we're
Yeah.
kind of on this arc, right? Like, my wife and I and our 2 kids, we've been living the mountain life, but with 2 infants, right? We're having more and more doctor's appointments. So we ended up getting a place
Mm.
in Boise for a small place just so we could have a landing spot when the roads avalanched in or rocks slid in, which happens quite a bit. It happened last week. So Boise's our closest metropolitan area. So
Hmm.
the reason I say that is if you're in Boise, we're just a cool 3-hour 4-wheel drive ride up the road. So if you want to come stop by and check out Atlanta, Idaho, you totally should, because it's
I think it
the
was
best
3 hours
place in
and 40
Idaho.
minutes. I think it was three
Yeah.
hours and 40 minutes because I actually checked it out.
Okay.
I might actually come out to the area just so I have an understanding of where it is that you're from. And
Okay. Well,
uh,
well, do not
it
follow Google Maps. Talk to me first because Google Maps will lead you astray, which it did for me the first time that I went out to look for the house at the house that I ended up
yeah,
buying in winter. It took me
yeah.
about 280 miles the wrong way to a road that was
What?
avalanched in. I had to turn around and make the 6-hour journey back just to go check it out. So
Yeah, yeah, it's always fun watching those maps. I remember we were in Greece and we had a place there and I spent a couple months over in Skopelos. And the maps would take everybody down some old abandoned road. And we're like, okay, let's see how far these people get because it just gets narrower and narrower on super steep cliff sides. And yeah, having the wherewithal to question technology such as Google or artificial intelligence, I think, is a good life skill for people to have.
yeah, one we all need to continue to refine. But
Well, I really like the fact that, you know, that you just figured it out. I was having dinner with a friend a couple weeks ago, and he's got a sailboat. And I said, "Oh, you picked up a sail. I didn't know you knew how to sail." He's like, "Travis, it's a sheet and it catches a wind. Anybody can sail," right? I said, "Huh." He's like, "I mean, there's, I'm sure, a lot more to it, but I mean, you just keep zigzagging yourself over if you got to go into the wind. But, you know, anyone can sail a boat at the base level of it." And so now that's something that we use in our household. Jason, if you're listening, anyone can sail a boat. I like it. Anyone can purchase a compound bow and go hunting. Yes, there's a lot to it, but you didn't let that dissuade you. Uh, what out of the different ventures, because you talk about hunting and trapping, which ones presented the biggest challenge for you?
um, without a doubt, trapping. You know, it's
Yeah.
I would say that it's the thing that I've taken the most to, but it's also the thing that's been the most difficult. Um, you know, for anybody who's ever set a foothold trap as an adult for the first time with a little, so for people who don't know, think about a regular trap, two metal jaws, really tight coil springs of steel. You crank them down, get them flat, and there's this little pan that you set under a little lip of metal, and you're playing with this thing that is meant to hold a very angry animal. And, you know, when you set it, it's nerve wracking because inevitably you will trap yourself. And I did and
Mm,
have many times over. Um, Obviously, they're non lethal, they hurt in a lot of cases.
mm,
But, you know, that barrier of entry to do that, and then the amount of study and the amount of intricacy that goes into trapping any animal, especially canines, I found out, like I said, they're way smarter than me. Uh, it is difficult, but actually pursuing trapping, you know, learning to actually talk about leveraging the whole animal, you know, taking the fur, you know,
mm,
for beaver, like leathering the tail, pulling out the
mm,
glands because you want to use them again in other lures and baits that you might be using. It is an exercise in using the whole animal when you do get one, and you
mm,
become way better at like caping stuff out and, you know, butchering because you get to do it a lot. You get a lot more reps in. But I
mm,
think that it's made me a better, like, archery hunter just because of the study that goes into it, and, you know, that includes beaver, otter, marten. There's just so many different animals that you get a really you get, like, a PhD more quickly or an MBA in animal husbandry just because you're out there all the time and you get to see tracks, you get to understand what they're doing in different scenarios, like, if you walk in a different way, what are they gonna react? If you don't descent
mm.
your traps well enough, are they gonna do something and pee on your pan and embarrass you?
Like what
It's
happened with the fox,
yeah,
right? I think,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, it was, yeah, and, it's happened with wolves and coyotes too. They're smart animals, but, yep, that's been the hardest learning curve for me, but also the most rewarding, and again, what I have found myself to be truly most drawn to. Like I'm going archery mule deer hunting and javelina hunting next week in Arizona. I'm very excited about that, but I'd be a liar if I weren't excited to already get back to my trap lines to go check for beaver, otter. Like yesterday I found the new dam upstream from us with a lodge that I had missed in the summer. So it's an exciting thing.
Very cool. My trapping experience basically boils down to trying to get rid of raccoons in the backyard, and got some raccoons, got some skunks, um, uh, mostly live trapping. Conibear, tried that. Actually, for raccoons, I found they climb, they don't dig, and they're shock
Yep.
sensitive. So for real cheap on Amazon, you can buy a cattle guard and electric fence, put it at the top of your wood fence. Never had a raccoon problem since. Why I why I went that route? Did you know that raccoons use a communal latrine?
I did not know that. Look at
I
that.
didn't know.
Facts of
I
the day.
didn't. Yeah, I didn't know this either until we bought our current house that we're in, and there was great big piles of raccoon crap right in the middle of our yard. And I started looking into it, and it turns out they will all come to the same spot, and they'll use a communal latrine to go to the washroom. And so I was out there with slingshots and pellet guns and trying to do everything. Paprika, hot sauce, all the things that the internet says is good. And uh, nothing was successful. Pellet guns, they just kind of shrug a little bit if you snap them with that. So started doing the trapping, and man, there's so many. The electric fence, solved it, gone, never had a problem since. And skunks,
Yeah,
have you
but
ever trapped a skunk? Was that?
I have,
Okay.
and my wife is still, let's say how to put it, going back to wanting to use the whole animal, like, trying to extract skunk essence is an
Right.
art, uh, not so much a science.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I have very interesting animals, make beautiful pelts. We have them up there, so trap them
Okay.
if they step in one. I'm not really targeting them, but have caught them before.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've been fortunate enough to never have gotten any stink on me, but live trapped them, relocated them, cardboard shield, homebrew, whatever, as I'm trying to let them out. But I actually, after reading your book, I thought, you know what? I should learn more about trapping. And I've reached out to the local British Columbia Trapping Association. They've got a 3-day
Awesome.
course. So I got to check that out and see what it's about. But you did a course as well in trapping, didn't you?
Yeah, well, with Idaho, right, you have to have a trapper's license. So I
Right.
went and did that, and that was okay. It was very basic. Like, hey, here are some basic traps. I didn't learn as much as I thought, but I had my heart set on wolf trapping. That's a big thing out here in Idaho. I was getting to
Mm,
see firsthand how some of the, you know, wolf populations around where I live, because you can hear them, you can see them, decimating elk and deer all around us.
right.
I was focused on that. And they have to have in Idaho a wolf trapper's license, that allows me to take up to like 15 wolves every season. Um,
Right.
that's where I learned a lot. The teacher there was a really great wolf trapper. He actually went into kind of the science and the art behind it, and talked about what you shouldn't do, like how you should go through these different processes. It was a mentorship thing for me, and that was helpful. I still haven't trapped a wolf successfully to this date. I mean,
Mm,
they're super smart, but it helped me with all my other canine trapping. And since then, I've gone to a bunch of different courses on it just out of my own curiosity, because there's so much to learn. And in fact, I'm going down to the Idaho Trappers Association first sale in 2 or 3 weeks here in Glens Ferry, Idaho, and going to be there signing books. But I'm planning to take a lot of the courses they have. They'll have, you know, different beaver type of approaches you can do for different
mm.
scenarios. The list is endless on, people who have experienced and had success doing things other people haven't, and vice versa. So the community, I have found with trapping, has been way more welcoming for a newbie than the hunting community. That's not to say that I've been,
Really?
I have. And,
Okay.
and I think it's
Nice.
partially because it's a little more accessible, maybe.
Mm,
It's, I'll have to give props. So Clay Newcomb with Meat Eater, I reached
mm-hmm,
out to him coldly to read my chapter on bear, where I mentioned him as kind of a little bit of an inspiration. He took the
mm-hmm,
time to read it and said, "Hey, this looks good. You're allowed to use my name." I said, "Okay." But when I talked to Tom Miranda, who's, a famous bow hunter, but, cut his teeth trapping, very, involved in the National Trappers Association, and then Rusty Kramer, who's the Idaho Trapper Association, those guys didn't just like say, "Okay, hey, new guy, like, yeah, I'll read your stupid little chapter and give you a thumbs up. Like, you know, they said, this is awesome. Like, we're very glad you're here. What can we do to help you? And it was this
Really?
kind of, yeah, it was an effusive, like, I think because it's a little bit more on the periphery and it's a lot often under a lot more scrutiny. Uh,
Mm.
the things that go around it are a lot more tight knit, and they want more people in. They want people who are, educated and can articulate the experience in a way that is honest, but also, positive, and talk about the benefits of it. And, a guy, the Montana Trappers Association president, Chris Morgan, he's been fantastic, giving me all sorts of stuff. And, one of the things that my wife is equal parts happy and equal parts, tired of it is
Mm.
since the books come out, I've had more trappers send me boxes of their homemade lures and, cat urine and other stuff. So without fail, like at least once or twice a month, my wife will come in with like a soggy UPS box that smells like, I think this one's for you, and hand it over. So it's just been super welcoming is really what it boils
That
down
is
to.
so cool.
Yep.
I always like talking to people who've got a fair bit of experience in a certain field and asking them, like, what have you learned that might surprise someone? Like, I asked a friend, he's a firefighter, and I said, I know about fire. I like fire. What can you teach me about fire? What did you learn in your training that might surprise people? And he says, oh, everything burns in a gaseous state. Well, I guess nearly everything. Nothing
Mm.
burns in a solid state. You heat it up hot enough, it'll gas off, and that's what burns. I'm like, huh, I like that. And I use that for when teaching fire making. That's if someone just keeps that in the back of their head. Okay, I can't just jump to a big piece of wood because it's got to get hot enough to gas off, and that's what it is going to actually make the fire. For trapping, what have you learned that maybe surprised you that you wouldn't have thought of prior to getting into it?
Oh man, that's going to be hard to boil down to just one. So let me think about like what is the most beneficial and probably painful lesson that I've ever learned in trapping. Um, Let me think about a way to get something that's succinct and able to be taken away. I mean, other than animals are just way smarter than me, um, it would be river otters. And again, this is not going to be like a piece of advice you'll be able to take away like your friend. So I apologize for that in
Sure.
the first place. But river otters are hell of a swimmer, man. They
Yeah.
are fast. Oh yeah. I mean, you might see it in the zoo, so it might not be a lot of new stuff. But I actually had one of the coolest experiences of my life um, about a month ago, right at the start of otter season here in Idaho. I was out trapping beaver, and I got out with my headlamp and I was about to get in the water to set some conibears and some foothold traps, and I saw a beaver.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, cool." And normally when you see a beaver, they scurry, right? And it dipped in the water.
Sure.
I went over there and I was shining down with my headlight, and this beaver is just hauling through the water. I'm like, "What is this thing doing? And why is it not afraid of me?" And it kind of came up in the dark on the mound I was standing on near the side of the road. And I was like, "Well, that's weird." So I clapped my hands and it disappeared and went into the den. Got in the water, chest high waders, deep water. This beaver comes out and starts swimming circles around me. I'm like, this is like the coolest thing ever. And I really hope I don't get attacked by a beaver because a buddy of mine had just sent me some cheesy horror flick called Zombievers, where like the end of the world and everything.
Seen it?
Yep. So you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Seen it?
Um, yeah. So I was afraid that was going to be the scenario, but it
Yeah.
went away. Set my traps. Came back the next day, and I had this beautiful, huge otter on a drowning wire. And what I realized is, we had torn out that dam, we being the highway district, which I was the chairman of at the time for the rural area. And that empty den had been taken over by otter. So it was an otter
Mm.
that was swimming around me. Beaver aren't that fast in the water.
Right.
So,
Okay. That
but
makes
it was
sense.
pretty cool. And, hindsight being what it is, they call otters river wolves for a lot of different reasons because they can be pretty cranky little curious things and eat all our trout.
Mm.
So I was glad that I did not get attacked by an otter. But the coolest thing I've learned trapping is that otter are really fast and really cool swimmers and cool thing to have a little interaction with.
That's pretty neat. I've seen them kind of going under the dock at one of the cabins. I'll see them as they kind of like just slink down into the river and then disappear. Never had the experience to watch them just zip around like that. That'd be pretty neat.
Yeah, and I guess the only
Yeah.
other thing to take away if you start trapping, a lot of animals have bacula, penis bones, and when you
Right.
trap a lot of
Swizzle
animals
sticks.
and you wanna get into, using everything, you'll have an endless supply of Christmas gifts if you get into trapping.
Here's a
So
swizzle stick for you.
exactly. So, yeah. Save
Oh,
money on
love it.
Christmas, start trapping.
Actually, a guy was killed by a beaver. I remember reading about that a number of years ago. I guess a thing came at him and bit him in his leg, and then he got his femoral. Apparently, if I
Wow.
recall correctly, he was actually killed by a beaver. The other weird
I
one
would
about
that,
yeah, what's that?
seeing their teeth, like, when you see their teeth and you, like, pull back
Mm,
their lips and cape out their heads, their teeth are huge and they're like steel. So it's one of those things like I could see that
yeah.
totally happening,
Uh,
but what a bad way to
As a
go.
kid, oh, it'd be terrible. Everyone would be laughing about that forever.
I
Killed by a
know.
beaver? Are you kidding me? I
Yeah.
remember as a kid, I had a beaver skull that I'd found, and it's got these kind of yellow teeth that are coming out, but you could pull the teeth and just keep on coming and coming and coming and curling all the white stuff. The teeth grow real far back into their head, which was something that was kind of an interesting one.
Yeah.
And I guess
Yeah.
they always have to chew because their teeth they're always growing, right?
That's my understanding. So yeah, they're constantly chewing and knocking trees over our road. So they're always at work. I know that's for sure.
Here's another one that a lot of people raises an eyebrow when I mention it. I don't know if it's been your experience, if you've ever seen this, but driving through the tunnel, Highway 99, we turn into Ladner. I look up on the right. I'm like, what the hell is that thing up in a tree there? It looks like a beaver. Did you know that beavers can climb trees?
I did not know that. That's the second factor hitting with me was something that I feel like I should know. But no, I'm gonna start
I
looking up
didn't
and
know.
now.
Yeah, how the heck did this beaver get up in the tree? I've never in a million years would have thought that there'd be a beaver. I pulled over and I'm looking at him. That's a beaver up there in the tree.
Yeah,
Anyways,
the beaver facts are endless. Like one of the cool things in Idaho, like in the Frank Church Wilderness, I think it was in the 20s, 30s. I might have the dates wrong, but there had been a dearth of population and they needed some deforesting efforts. So they parachuted in a bunch of beavers in anticipation of you know, trying to deforest it. And there's like a commemorative coin in Idaho or something like of a parachuting beaver and all sorts of weird stuff like that. So then it's a rich history, and that's what has kind of drawn me to beaver. Like this one on my wall, and it for us, Canada, the U.S., the Canadian fur trade, the American fur trade, like that's what our countries were founded on. That's where we all
yeah,
started was in the
yeah,
rivers, trapping beaver and feeling that connection today. Like as cheesy as it sounds, and you'd asked about like what I've taken to, like being in the water, in the snow, in the winter with a trap on my back, trying to target an animal that people have been doing for hundreds of years is one of the coolest freaking things that I've ever done. And it makes me happy every time I do it, regardless of
that
success rate.
that is awesome. Are you typically using the compound bow? Because I saw one of the pictures. I look like in the bottom corner. There's a fluted barrel with a muzzle brake on a rifle. But reading how you write, and you write very well, it doesn't seem like you really come from a gun background, though.
No, I've done pistol shooting. So like my ex-wife, FBI special agent, like we would go shoot all the time. Like I'm not unfamiliar with weapons. I grew up with weapons in the household, shooting with
Mm,
uncles, like rifle stuff like that. But that rifle you see is my 300 PRC. It was gifted
okay.
to me by a buddy of mine who is a hunter, a rifle hunter.
Mm,
And he and I owned a company together. And one year we weren't doing so great. So he's like, I'm going to build us custom rifles. I'm like, all right, that's fine. Better than taking a check. So he built this beautiful 300 PRC, put a great optic on it. He's like, this is going to be great, blah, blah, blah. It
mm,
sat in my closet for a year just because, for me, I shot thousands of arrows before I even went and sat in my tree stand for the first time and never saw a deer.
mm-hmm.
It's a level of comfort for me to be able to go out and attempt to take an animal with something. So I did actually in this past year, I ended up doing a course here in Boise, Idaho. It was a long range shooting course. So, they
Mm.
taught me how to take that gun out to 1,000 yards, a little over 1,000 yards. Um, but since then, I set up some steel behind her house in Atlanta and I've shot it maybe 3 or 4 times. So it's one of those things where, you know, I wouldn't, if you get said, hey, Zach, you can go on a doll sheep hunt tomorrow, but it's going to be rifle, you know, unless I'm 200 yards, which maybe we could do, or zeroed, I'm probably not going to take a shot just because I'm not comfortable. That doesn't mean that that's not on my docket. Like, I would love to be proficient at rifle hunting. Like, but what I've
Mm.
learned, my false assumption coming into hunting was that archery is this, again, this was my pretension and ego speaking. Like, this is
More
closer
romantic.
to, yeah, exactly. It's this, I'm going to be close and have this experience with animal. Um, Rifle hunting in the Mountain West in Canada and the US, I don't care if you're with a stick, a knife, a bow, a gun, it is hard no matter what you do. And
Hmm.
especially like the rifle seasons, like for elk don't tend to be when they're as vocal. So, you
Right.
have to be a little bit further away. And, I have an appreciation for that now, just bow hunting that, you know, there's half the time that I've seen animals that I don't even know if I'd be able to take with a rifle. And there's just
Mm.
as good a chance that I woof a shot with a rifle as I do with a bow, given practice. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's something I want to do and I have the equipment now. It's just a matter of making it a prioritization and it just hasn't bubbled up to the top for me yet. But anybody who wants to come take me rifle hunting in Idaho and teach me the ropes and please come out and let's go.
Well, let's put that out there for anyone in Idaho. I'd say come up to BC, but for anything big game here, you got to be with a guide. Hey, I
Yep.
can take you out for waterfowl, but you can do that pretty easily where you are too. And in
Yep.
fact, back in Louisiana, some great waterfowling down there.
Yeah, I was bummed. It's one of those things, the catch 22, like the what ifs. Not growing up hunting. I think about all the missed opportunities and places that I have lived, like,
Mm.
um, you know, obviously South Carolina, Tennessee, good deer hunting young. Louisiana, I missed out on waterfowl and upland type birds. I lived
Mm.
overseas for a long time, so I lived in Kyrgyzstan where they have some amazing like ibex and other hunting opportunities. I lived in the Caucasus Mountains in Georgia and Russia.
Hmm.
Awesome
Cool.
hunting opportunities. So I missed out on all those, is what I'm saying, by not getting into it younger.
Hey, you're into it now. That's all that matters, right?
Yep.
When you're putting this book together, did you start out on your journey thinking, I'm going to document along the way, this is going to be a book? Or did you, at what point did you decide that this was going to be a book?
Yeah, I didn't have it planned out. Like I've written one other book. It was kind of about like artificial intelligence ish stuff.
Okay.
I've always liked to write. I've always journaled. I've always done these things. I've blogged. I've always liked long form writing because for me,
Mm.
I have such like a monkey mind. Like to get a clear thought out, I need to spend time putting it on paper, digital or
Mm.
otherwise. And that's just my medium for getting like my own thoughts across. Like if I'm frustrated with my wife, I will say, "Hey, let's not talk right now because I'm going to have word vomit that's just going to piss you off more. So let me go away, put it down on paper and then we can talk about it in a little while." And that's worked well for me. But when I went through that divorce, like my ex-wife and I, despite the kind of unexpected nature of it, we were really kind to each other. And that was like my mantra from the second that I heard about it is like, I am not going to react to this in anger. And that took a lot from me to not
Mm.
react in anger about the situation that I happened to find myself in. And so I actually went and was thinking, after a few months, I'd been in Idaho, I was like, you know, she and I were still friends. We were being very kind to each other. I'm like, I should write a book about like, you know, how to get through divorce, ego free, and still come out with some version of a friendship, right?
Mm.
If that's what you wanted. So
Sure.
that was kind of my initial thought for a book. But then as I kind of meditated on it in the woods, I was like, that's not the book that I'm writing. Like this is a real true just journey. Like the divorce is part of that. And like the way I reacted is, good, and maybe I could write that book one day. But for me, it was this just transformative experience. And as I was journaling, just as I always did, I started seeing these stories come together. And you know, I thought in my head, like, there's no way I could write a hunting or trapping book because all I'm doing is failing in my mind, the way
Mm.
we defined it earlier, right? I'm not harvesting animals.
Sure.
I'm making a lot of mistakes along the way. And like, who would want to read that, right? But as I
Mm.
thought about it more and I talked to more people and I like tried to be honest, because when I went through this divorce, I'm like, you know what? I want to just be honest as much as I can the rest of my life. Like, I just want to be open, even if it's embarrassing. So I'd
Mm.
have conversations with people and hunters, and they'd be like, "Oh, dude, I went through that too." I'm like, "You did?" But like, you seem like you got your shit together. Like, no, no, I went through that too, man. And those kind of started to compound. And I was like, going back to how we discussed about writing for that persona, I'm like, there's got to be so many more people out there that are just like me because I am not some unique snowflake. I am, a Joe Blow who happened to be in, the corporate world, a million other people just like me who have these thoughts, but, have
Yeah.
some mental barrier. So that was why and how it came about. But it started with a completely different idea.
Interesting. And you mentioned meditating out in the woods. Is that something you do often?
Mm. I talk about it with my wife. My wife now is very religious. I grew up in the South, religious household, but I never took to religion so much. Like, I explored the
Sure.
world. I lived overseas for a long time. I lived in Saudi Arabia, so I studied Islam. I studied Orthodox Christianity in Russia and these other areas. It was always of interest when I would travel. Like, you know, there's a lot of common threads I found. Like, if you put aside like the religious organizations, do good to your neighbor, be kind, blah blah blah.
Sure.
But my wife's very religious. You know, we go to church, we do these different things, and I enjoy it now as an adult. But I told her from the beginning, like, I feel religious when I happen to be out in the woods. And I started to notice that as an adult when when I started to learn to hunt. When I'm sitting in this tree stand, despite being bored, I had this appreciation for these things around me. I wasn't intentionally meditating on it, but I found myself in that state. And especially like when
Mm.
you're in a place like Idaho or Montana, like where you can't help but feel small every time you walk out of your doorstep. And that reminder
Mm.
of being small, when you do it every day and you actually, you know, at least acknowledge it and don't just let it kind of slide by and become the norm. For me, that just like beat me down in a positive way to where like I was having religious experiences out there standing in the water trying to trap for beaver, no matter the outcome. When I hear an elk bugle, I'm like, that's as close to God as I'm getting on this earth, in my
Mm.
mind. And those things compounded too. And for me, that's my religious experience, an organized religious experience is just getting out in the woods. And it's something you can't describe to people who don't go do it themselves.
I would have to agree with that. There is just as, like you say, a religious, there's a cleansing, there's a calming, a oneness sort of experience about just being out in the woods, or if you're a Canadian, being out in the bush.
Yep.
Um, and people will laugh at us. Oh, that bush right there, which bush are you talking about? Right. But really,
Yep.
you get up in the mountains, you get out into a little bit of isolation. And I've had a past podcast guest, Nikki Venchendel. She was on Alone, which is a TV show where they put you out in the woods and you got to survive. And she did phenomenally well. And she's like, you can do it in your backyard. You can go to a park and do it. You don't have to be like right out in the middle of nowhere. You don't have to be doing something extreme like what Zach is doing. You can still have those experiences. I just I find it really interesting how it seems with AI, with computers and everything else that technology, the way that we're working, how we're trying so hard to make everybody so connected, but yet how there's this fundamental thread of being disconnected that seems to be running through most people that I talk to, that I encounter. And I don't know if that's just because I'm in an echo chamber or I'm surrounded by people with similar kind of interests, or if there is a higher level of disconnectedness from the fact that people just aren't experiencing the outdoors in the same way. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. My perspective is, writing this book. So obviously, my big social media is LinkedIn, right? As goofy as that sounds, professional networking site. But this past year, as I wrote the book, I'd have people. It's funny. I work for a huge company, publicly traded. I'm on calls with vendors from Google, from wherever, and I just decided I don't care. Like I'm going to be me, even if I get fired. So I'm showing up to these calls with, animals behind me in various states of undress. If I got blood on my hands in the morning and I'm on a call. And what's funny is it sparks a conversation. And I was afraid, to be honest. I was afraid that I was going to get fired. There's a lot
Right.
of woke cultures, things like that. So I tried
Sure.
to be like cautious, and I'm not showing it off. If it happens to be in the background, that happens to be in the background.
Yeah.
But the amount of people in the tech industry that I, work with on a daily basis, they might see it and not say anything. But without fail, I have gotten so many messages from people saying, "Do you mind if we talk?" And
Yeah.
it's been amazing to get on the call with these people, who live in San Francisco, live in New York, live in Austin, and might not be getting that dose of, I'm going to call it reality. I don't mean like reality and, like the way most people use it, but like real outdoor experiences, like what the earth and world really just is, which is, violence and meanness in the outdoor world. And
Sure.
they
Well,
become curious.
there is no mean, there is no nice. There this is.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times that's violent and, a lot of
Sure.
times it's beautiful and charming too, but
Yeah.
there's extremes. And people start to
Yeah.
say, like, how are you doing that? Like, why? Like I'm very curious. There's a lot of curious people coming to me saying, like, I kind of have these feelings too. Like I've been stuck in lockdown for 2 years in my, you know, studio apartment in New York City with crackheads running around stabbing people outside. Like, is there a better place? I'm like, well, probably. Uh,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of people out there that are having these kind of innate, like you said, there's this common thread of disconnectedness that people,
Hmm.
I believe, and again, I could be wrong. I always reserve the right to be wrong, but I believe that you know, there is an innate feeling in all of us to have a connectedness to nature. And like you said, technology, our society is pushing us in a different direction. And I think with technology, people were becoming a little hip to that. Even though they're being
Hmm.
sucked in and there's addictive features to the things we're leveraging, there really is this opportunity where there is information out there if you pull the thread a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
there. I don't know if you've had the chance to read it, but I'm going to go on this little diatribe because I think it's really important. At
Okay.
the end of the book, I mentioned this short story. I think that it's written by E.M. Forrester. This story was written in 1907. You can Google it. It's called uh, "The Machine Stops," I believe, or "When the Machine Stops." You'll have to fact check me there, but you can look it up. UC Berkeley has like the 27 pages. This story was written in 1907, and this guy writes this story and paints this picture where the whole world has kind of migrated to the core of the earth and everybody is assigned their own rooms. They betrayed the earth. They don't want oxygen. They want this machine to provide for them. All they care about is higher education and philosophy. So essentially, all these people are born and then they're taken to their own room, which might be on the other side of the earth from their parents. They're provided for. They can FaceTime. This guy predicted FaceTime with people across the world. All they're trying to do is just become more educated. But the story goes, this mother is in this thing and she's irritated by her son calling her from across the world. He's like, I need you to come see me. And it was very rare for people to actually go and see them. So this writer also predicted air travel. So the mother
Hmm.
gets on this plane, leaves like the underground colony and flies over it. And part of the story is her kind of sitting in this plane looking down at the beautiful, bare Himalayas, just disgusted that, how could people have ever wanted to be in that like violent, you know, barren place of, trouble and struggle and
Hmm.
everything else, and then lands. And her son is like, I found a way out, like this, there's something better out there. And the mom's like, no, you're crazy. And the story ends with the son kind of like climbing up through this thing as the machine breaks down and people start dying underground because they're reliant on this apparatus. And the son is the one who kind of climbs up through the rafters and makes it to the earth and finds other people who had escaped too. And they're like, this is, he was afraid to breathe air for the first time, but then he did. He's like, oh my
Mm.
God, this is it. So that story is so apropos for what we're talking about, which is there's this innate need. Like it feels so good to be provided for. It feels so good to have creature comforts, but there's a beauty in struggle, and there's no better place to find struggle than in nature, and to kind of get back in touch with that innate feeling, I believe.
I like that. I'm right on side with you. You can't be happy if you've had everything given to you. That struggle is that learning process, those difficulties, that overcoming, the building. That's happiness is a byproduct of all of that. If you try and shortcut all of that, if you co-opt responsibility of your food gathering and your harvesting, air quotes here, of animals to the butcher, to the grocery store, to a Costco delivery, you're doing away with that struggle. And your struggles, now people are still going to have struggles. They're just going to be different struggles. Oh, my Costco delivery was an hour late instead of when I was. That means I missed my appointment, right? And I think that's where the I don't know, the reality of living starts to go askew. Like what's important to a person? What is important is, like, to me, what's important to me? Well, I want to make sure that I'm healthy. I want to make sure I'm healthy so I can look after my family and that they're healthy. And then my friend network. And I want to make sure that I have time to be able to allot the appropriate amount of time for my family, my friends, myself. Work's pretty far down there on the list. It's an important thing that needs to be done so that we can live, we can do our things, but push comes to shove. I mean, what's that saying? A rich man has many wants, a sick man has only one, right? What is it that makes you happy?
Yeah. Well, nothing's been cooler. No trapping, no animal. Like, hands down, being a dad is the coolest freaking thing in the world. And part of that whole idea of being a dad for me is like, I'm now getting to share some of these things that, are still a new, exciting thing for me, trapping and hunting. Like, I took my daughter in a sled out to check the trap lines the other day in the snow. She had a blast. She was,
Yeah.
petting the dead beaver and trying to give it a hug. I'm like, all right, well, let's not do that. But, you know, being a
Sure.
dad, it truly makes me happy. So family is the nutshell. Like, family is important to me. Clearly becoming more connected with nature. And I do want to say for people listening too, like, we've talked about my all in approach, right? That was right for me, and I happened to have the right time and opportunity to do that. But kind of like you said, you know you don't have to do that to start introducing little bits of wildness to kind of get reconnected with that common thread we all have. It might be
Mm.
going to do a pig butchering class where you would normally get your meat anyways. It might be
Mm.
taking a walk outside. The you know, opportunity is truly endless, and there's a spectrum, and I'm on one end of that spectrum, and that's worked for me. And anybody who wants to do it, good on you. You'll learn a lot, but there's stepping stones you can take along the way to kind of beat that down and beat the monotony. And I'm not immune to falling back into some of my old habits. Like I said, we ended up buying a place in Boise, so we had a place to land. And when we're here,
Mm.
we do DoorDash, we do
Yeah.
our Costco delivery, and those creature comforts are still nice. It's not like I'm fully out in the woods all the time with my pitchfork, telling people to stay away. But I
Well,
figured out what works for me to kind of keep that level that I need. And for me, like, when I am in Boise, a city of 200,000 people, it feels like when I used to live in Moscow or Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Like, it feels like a million person city, and I can only take
mm.
so much before I'm like, you know, once you're free, you can't really go back kind of situation. Like, once you've tasted the
Yeah.
marrow of, you know,
Yeah.
real solitude.
Like the chapter title of in your book, one of the chapter titles, Tasting the Marrow.
Yep.
I remember reading a study once about road rage. and there is a correlation on road rage incidents and population size. And they said essentially, and I mean, it makes sense, but essentially under a certain population side, the preponderance of road rage was next to nothing. But once you reach a certain threshold, and I forget what it is, all of a sudden the people in your community don't become people in your mind anymore. For most people, it's just a car or someone or something just cut me off and I'm upset. In a small enough metric, small community, it's like, oh, there's Bob again. He's probably drunk. Or there's Janice, she's pretty old. And you just kind of let it go. But there's a dehumanization process that happens in people's minds over a certain population size. And yeah,
that's beautiful. And not beautiful in the fact that, that happens, but it's true. And that happened to me. And I lived that, right? I was living in these big cities before I went to, you know, Idaho, of a town of 35 people. And in the book, I talk about like, I had no interest in being a part of that community when I went there. Like I was there to like isolate, learn to hunt and trap, neighbors, fine. But I got sucked in, by hook or by crook, neighbor had to help me learn how to open a flue. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm Zach, by the way. You're like, oh yeah, you're the new guy. I'm like, no, that's me. But it happened that way. And there was that rehumanization of, I had been so burned by these big cities and this tiredness that I felt, and that, dehumanization, like, yeah, someone driving down the street, that asshole, they're cutting me off, like, oh, what I would do to them. But now you're right. Like, it doesn't mean people don't piss you off, because they do, but you know who it is, and you know more about their life experience, what they're going through in any given time, or you might be the
you're
one
more
pissing someone else
understanding.
off. Yeah, it
Yeah.
goes both ways, but it's that was a big learning experience for me too. It almost, I took the hunting and trapping is great, but it also just regrounded me as a human and made me appreciate, like, despite the BS, despite the polarization, despite the, you know, pressure from social media one way or the other, an algorithm pushing certain things down your throat. Like, we're all humans. We all have stories to tell. Some of us are innately bad, I'm sure, but for the most part, people are great. I learned that
Yeah.
a long time ago and forgot it. Like, I lived in Russia. I lived in Saudi Arabia. You think of like all the kind of bad actor states in a lot of our minds. Like, the people I met there on the ground, some of the most amazing, beautiful human beings I've ever had the privilege of talking with and conversing with and breaking bread with. And, my journey back in the States, ironically, kind of broke that down in me when we were living in these big cities, like you said.
Funny. So you took that conversation to the next place where I was going to take it. Awesome segue on your part, but that was something that I picked up on in reading your book, and maybe I'm reading too far into it. Maybe I'm not. You'll let me know. But I got the sense that you wanted to be away from everybody, only to find at the end that it is the people around you that really kind of made you feel whole.
Yep.
Is that an accurate reading of your book?
Yeah, and we've touched on it a little bit, right? Like, 100%.
Yeah.
I went out there to defy everybody. I was feeding my
Yeah.
own ego in that moment to say, I don't need my ex-wife. I don't need anybody. Like, I can go and I will learn to survive. And I
Mm.
didn't. Left to my own devices, I would have been like, had a handful of traps, a bow, and been even skinnier than I already am now, begging someone for food. And even going to the trapping community, right? Like, I wasn't expecting to be immersed in that, but they welcomed me with open arms. It's just been a welcoming community overall. And when I kind of like, it wasn't my own doing that made me break down that barrier. It was nature doing it for me in a lot of respects. So I'm appreciative of that, but
Mm.
it got me there. And now I'm very appreciative of my community. I am back to appreciating it in a much better light, and realizing that, yeah, there might be some people who could go out there and do it by themselves, but I'm not that guy, is the point.
Oh,
There are people like that, but it's not me. And I don't think it's a lot of
yeah.
people.
I think a lot of people have this imagination that it could be them or it is them, but the reality of it, I think we need each other, and we need to figure a way to be able to communicate with each other and get along. And, being out in the woods, being out in a smaller population, it allows you the ability to maybe do that a bit easier. So I know you're not really on social media. We did put some questions out to the Silvercore Club members, and as well on social media. We got a couple of questions, and I got one just, from a personal interest. It'll probably segue really well back into something that you said earlier when we were talking. But a couple questions that we got. One person says, what techniques and methods did you learn that could assist someone else looking to write their own book? Is there
So,
anything?
yeah, 100%. I have a golden rule, and I had written a book before, self-published, didn't go with a publisher. Um, I worked with a publisher. I worked with Tucker Max and that crew down there, and he taught me genuinely how to write. I knew how to write, but I
Mm,
was always in this vein of, again, ego. I would write something, write a couple paragraphs, and I'm like, oh yeah, Zach, that's pretty damn good. And then I'd immediately go back and start editing it, like just tweaking it and focusing on
yeah.
this. And then I never really got that far. So one of the things that they
Mm,
taught for me in writing a book is this idea of a vomit draft. So genuinely, if you have an idea for a book, create an outline and do not stop writing. Meaning from chapter 1 to chapter 40, whatever it is, start at chapter 1 and just write. And then when you get to a stopping point, you do not go back and reread what you wrote. And there's techniques for that. Like I actually ended up like blacking out with a highlighter what was before it. So when I came back the next day, I might leave like a half a sentence so I could understand where I left off and I'd
mm,
pick up. And that way you actually get words on paper. Now that makes the editing process that much more of a bear, but you
mm-hmm.
already have this turd to polish, right? So you got to get that on
Right.
paper. Um, that's that's changed my approach. So like now, I actually have another book coming out next week. You'll be able to check it out on Amazon. It's my first foray into fiction, historical fiction, the
Okay.
Western genre from the 1860s. And I just got in the mode of writing. So I write every day. So I wrote a whole nother book, shopped it around to a publisher, and now I have a 3-book contract deal for a Western series. I'm halfway
Cool.
through the second book in that series, and I'm on the hook for another one by the end of the year. But it's all taking that vomit draft. So
Very
get it on
cool.
paper. Yep, get it on paper is the key. Uh, then go back and edit it. Just do not, whatever you do not edit as you go. Just write.
Good advice. Okay, this next question is, and it's one that I actually will struggle with. It's about switching gears. Is it difficult to jump back and forth between the off grid life and then being the tech guy? Is it hard for you to switch gears?
Um, it's it was when I kept them separate. Meaning,
Mm,
like it was difficult when I put on my full facade of shirt and tie Zach, at the office, blurring my background and, being the stuffy asshole that we all are in our corporate lives. Um, what made it easier is when, I really just decided like, why am I bothering? Like if people are who I think they are, which they have turned out to be, they're going to be accepting. And as long as I'm not being gaudy with like, again, a dead animal behind me that's half skinned, you know, that's me being an asshole. But if I'm just being me and presenting myself as who I am and being open to talk to people about it, or someone asks me about my weekend, not being afraid to say, yeah, I was out on my trap line. Um, you know, that has helped me bridge that gap is just being authentic.
mm,
Now, I get not everybody is in that position to be able to do that. Um, but that was a commitment I made to myself. And it's actually, I would say, helped me more in my professional life because I've actually built more relationships with people, even people who don't hunt or trap, but are just curious and, building an actual personal relationship with them. But again, that's how I bridge the gap. Again, realizing that's not everybody in a job is probably in a position to do that without fear of losing their job. So that's not my advice
yeah.
to go just be willy nilly about it. But,
Yeah, but hey, find what's true to you, and it makes it easier, essentially.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so another person says, "Is this something that you see yourself doing in your old age, or is it a young person's game?"
I'm going to take that question as like hunting or and
That's
trapping.
that's kind of how I figured it. Yeah, or living in a remote community.
Yeah, it's funny. We have some hardy people in Atlanta, Idaho. when someone asked me that, there's a woman there, a single woman. She's a little hunchback, trouble walking. Her name is Sandy. She lives in our community by herself with a blue heeler dog. She's
Mm.
85 years old, lives by herself. I mean, she relies on the community. Like a lot of us will help, like go chop some wood, take it to her house. But this woman is free. She's the sweetest woman. She's had an interesting life, but now kids, grandkids grown, gone, husband gone. And she is proud and lives this off-grid, tough lifestyle. She's got to build fires every day. She's got to cook for herself. She's out walking with a little stick all the time. She's snowshoeing in the winter. Like, that's my idol. So the answer is yes.
Wow.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Like, as long as I can physically do it. And, if my wife and I are still around, when we're in that old of an
Yeah.
age, I sure hope that I can live that hardy lifestyle because I think she's getting longevity from it. That's my
Yeah.
observation. And I
Yeah.
hope I'm in the same boat, God willing.
Very cool. Um, Next one, last question that we, because we had a few in there, but we've already kind of gone over some of the questions that have been asked. So I've just been culling through as been going. Uh, what conveniences do you miss, if any, when living in a remote community?
Yeah. Well, so we have no grocery store, we have no gas station, and we have one bar restaurant. And I love the owners; they're great, but the menu diversity is not very wide. It's like
Grilled
you get
cheese
a
again?
burger. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, precisely. And
Yeah.
it's great because we do our own meal prepping up there. We eat a lot of the wild game. We do all that, but boy, do we miss sushi. So like there is when we do come down to like Boise,
Mm.
we have a hit list. We're like doing sushi one night, we're doing, takeout Chinese the other. And, for that like couple days or weeks, like by the time we leave Boise, we are like sick. We're like, we don't want to eat out again. And we do it every time. So we don't learn our lesson. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think just like some of the food, right? Like I said,
Yeah, I could see that.
we love eating wild game, all that stuff, but man, we're still humans. We're not like super
Yeah.
athletes now, like all performance based. So we like our creature comfort. So food is definitely the hardest for us. And you know, there's the electricity issues, right, off grid, but we kind of lean into that because the best thing, and I hope my employer's not listening, but when you don't have cell phone service and
Yeah.
your generator's out of gas or whatever else, and the power goes out for a few days, you kind of get like a 3 or 4 day like impromptu vacation. And that can be stressful in some situations if there's important stuff, and that might force you to drive down to the city. But if you can lean into it a little bit, even if it's for a day, like it's so nice to just like surprise be jolted back into the 1800s, and you're like, well, here we are.
That sounds amazing. I
Yeah.
do like it whenever, whenever, even in the urban area where I live, um, power goes out, things are down. I always embrace it. I love it because it's so hard to turn it off otherwise. It's,
Mhm.
well, I got to be there for work. Well, I got to do whatever it might be. Now you have an excuse. And maybe really what I should be doing is just making that excuse for myself.
Well, it's funny. I talk about it a little bit in the book, but I'll expand briefly here. Like when I first got out there and we'd have these frequent power issues and the internet would go down, we have no cell reception. So when the power's out, you're disconnected. So I had a little
Mm.
Garmin spot. And I talk about in the book, like at first, for the first several months, like every time that would go out and I'd be in a meeting or have meetings scheduled, I'd literally have stomach pains because I felt like I was missing out and all this stuff. I'd get on my Garmin and I'd like message my boss and they'd be like, well, okay, you're off grid. So why are you messaging me? I'm like, oh, okay. Um, but I learned that I'm not that damn important. Like, we also
Hmm.
bloat our calendars and work a lot with meetings that are also meant to feed our ego. Like previously, my whole sense of worth at my job was like, how many calendar invites do I have in a day? Because if people are wanting to request meetings with me, I must be producing something. And
Mm.
that taught me that that's not the case. And like, it made me better at asynchronous communication. Like, that meeting that I had posted, I could probably do that in an email or a Slack message. And I started
Mm.
adopting that more. And I saw, calendar invites fall off my calendar, and it was beautiful. But it came at that pain of forced into it and being
Mm.
extremely nervous that I was going to be fired at any minute.
Yeah. And you're saying that you realized that you just weren't as important as you, I guess, thought you were. Still important enough for the business to keep you employed, and your
Yep.
productivity level increased, if I remember correctly. You became better at your job. I don't
I feel
know.
like
There's
I
a
did.
lot to be learned. Yeah, there's a lot to be learned there. Okay, here's my question to you, which kind of segues back into this new business that you're putting together.
Alrighty.
As a tech guy, working in AI, working in the tech industry, realizing that it's not all bad, it's not all good. It's kind of how we use it and how we want to, what we choose to direct our attention at. How can we use technology to help strengthen people's relationship with the natural world?
Oh man, this is a fun one. So one of the cool things that's come about the book, come about my exposing what my life is like on a professional networking site like LinkedIn is that
Mm,
I've made a lot of cool connections of people who ride that line similar to me of like technology and the outdoors. So I've
mm,
been able to converse with I've become buddies with one of the guys from Mountain Tough Fitness. So people who don't know what
mm-hmm,
Mountain Tough is, it's an application. They do a lot of great workouts that are geared towards backcountry hunting. It's amazing. It got me ready for my elk hunts. That's an opportunity in the outdoor space to implement technology. The guys that Go Wild in Kentucky, it's a social media application all about hunting outdoors, trapping, hiking. Another cool application. It's like Instagram for the outdoor space, essentially.
mm,
Um, you know, there's a lot of things, even from a data science perspective, which is more my space. The CEO of Hunt Score, where you can use their application to start to figure out hunting units that have like higher percentage, opportunities for out of state hunters or in state hunters. It's a lot of really
ah,
cool. Yeah, it's awesome. Um, so there are these things that are coming up, and for me, being a tech guy, having gone through some guided hunts myself and saw the gap in customer management, I've worked with three buddies and we are launching theoutfitter.guide, www.theoutfitter.guide, in February at the Western Hunt Expo. So we'll have a booth down there. We somehow magically were able to get into that. That was a lot of luck and stars aligning. Um, but essentially, it's going to be a business or a B2B to C company where we will be selling our software to outfitters. Outfitters will sign up with us and they can kind of onboard their hunters seamlessly, let them sign contract. We can take over the payments digitally, so you're not sending a check to some PO box in Arizona.
mm,
And from that time that you sign up, then we as the outfitter guide take over the customer management. So you're not going to be dealing necessarily directly with the outfitter unless you need to, but we're going to be taking that gap period from the time you sign up to the time you're in the field preparing you, which means we'll be sending you notifications saying, hey, you know, John, you're in South Carolina at sea level. You're about to hunt Dall sheep in Alaska at 11,000 feet. Have you done your lunges? No. Well, here's a discount code or a free year of Mountain Tough Fitness. Get to it. Have you zeroed your rifle? According to your location, there's 4 rifle ranges around you, or here's a discount code for a long range course. Doing that along the way so you're not questioning. And when you're going on a hunt that already has a low probability chance of success, we're going to increase
mm,
that. At least that's our hypothesis. So that way, when you do get out in the field, you're not worried about if you're going to get fed and if you need to pack more Cliff Bars. You'll know that
mm,
upfront easily, and you're going to be most prepared, and you're going to feel better about this large money investment you're making along the way as well, which hopefully will give outfitters more repeat customers, give them other opportunities to monetize as well, so they can up and build their own businesses in a more deliberate fashion as well. So that's it in a nutshell. But yeah, technology and outdoors, there's a lot of opportunity here and a lot more younger folks like me who have tech experience getting into the space. I imagine and expect to see some more really cool things where the two things, meld together in a way that's not too obtrusive.
Zach, you're one smart dude. I like that. Is there anything that, well, we've been talking for a bit now, but is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel we should before we kind of wrap things up here?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered quite a bit, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a blast, Travis. I've really enjoyed getting to chat and talk, a little bit more in depth about some of the underlying currents of the book, and our society writ large. So I hope a lot of people take something away from it.
Well, Zach, thank you very much for being on the Silvercore podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate it.